So today we're going to take a look at the controller class and how to fix it. Yesterday I did a video about Omen, go and watch that. It's kind of the part 1 to this video if you want to. But today we're going to talk about how to fix the worst agents in the controller class, because it's just not a very balanced class of agent. You've got Omen here sitting at 62% pick rate at champs, Viper at 50%, and then you have to come way down to find the other controllers, Brim at 13%, Astra at 12%, Harbor at 7%, and Clove at 4%. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how I would buff those 4 agents who aren't doing so well in the controller class. And let's start with Astra, who's a very interesting agent to discuss, because most people, when you talk about Astra and the buff that they would love to give Astra and see Astra get, is to get the 5th star back. And I don't think that would be the best idea. The reason that I don't think that giving Astra the 5th star back would be the best idea is because people have gotten a lot better at using their utility than they were in 2021 or 2022 at all levels of the game, but particularly the higher levels of the game. And I would very much worry that Astra would become really quite strong if you gave Astra the 5th star back. The reason for that is because if you have a 5th star, essentially that 5th star acts as essentially a free, this could go anywhere on the map, I'm saving it, you know, to see what happens in the round, and just means that basically no matter what happens in the round, you will have impact as an Astra, because of course you can place that star anywhere on the map, and if you always have a spare one free just waiting no matter which side your opponents go to or whatever your opponents are trying to do, if you can always have an impact every single round, and you know that because you always have a 5th star available to you, that to me is just quite scary. Now, there are some ways you could maybe mitigate that with giving Astra a 5th star, but maybe taking some things away. For instance, you might say that the Gravwell and the Stun, they don't have cooldowns. You only get to use them once no matter what in the round, right? That might be some way of balancing the 5th star with, you know, you only get one use of these abilities and there is no cooldown and that's it. So, for instance, once your opponents see that, hey, they've used the Gravwell, well, that's it. Now there is no other Gravwell. We can be certain of that. So if we do manage to bait it out, then, you know, we know that they're not going to have one later on in the round. That could be one way of potentially offsetting the 5th star, but I think unless something like that were to happen, I would be quite reluctant to just give Astra a 5th star. So instead, my preferred buff for Astra would actually be to do with the cooldown times. One would be for the recall star cooldown time. I would much prefer it if Astra's recall star cooldown was much lower, right? Something in the 5 to 10 second range, somewhere in there, just allowing Astra to kind of consistently do that, right? To consistently make use of recalling stars and, you know, putting those little 1 second smokes up every so often. I think that would be a kind of much simpler and cleaner buff for Astra that, you know, would be pretty useful on some maps, but have more limited use and would really kind of allow you to explore how often you can, you know, be recalling stars across the map to find small advantages. I think that would be quite cool. Also, the cooldowns for both the Gravwell and the Stun as well, I think if those were reduced pretty significantly, that would also be quite a cool way of buffing Astra, because then you could just play Astra as kind of almost like a pseudo initiator, right? If the Gravwell and Stun only had like 20-second cooldowns, in theory, if you were playing like an Astra Omen comp, you know, you could just have Omen be your smokes essentially and use Astra as kind of just a full, like, I'm just placing stuns and Gravwells for my team throughout the round, and I'm basically an initiator, a deep lying initiator essentially. But I think that both of those would be healthier and probably safer options than giving Astra a 5th star, but both would probably help Astra quite a lot. Okay, now let's come to Brimstone. And Brim is an interesting one to buff because he's kind of fulfilling his role almost perfectly. And so even though he only has a 13% pick rate, and you might not think of Brim as the strongest agent or anything close to it in the game, in terms of being like an easy to learn, easy to pick up controller agent, he fulfills that very well. In terms of being an agent that is good on certain maps where, you know, he isn't limited by the lack of refreshable smokes, he does that pretty well as well, right? On Bind, he's the best controller, both in terms of pick rate and win rate. And on Fracture as well, when that was in the pool, that was true there also. So basically, if you want Brim to, you know, have a decent pick rate, you basically just want Fracture to come back, which I do. So Riot, please bring back Fracture and Brim would probably be in an okay space. Now, with that said, could Brim, you know, use with some buff? Would it be the worst thing if Brim got a buff? No. And I think even if you just gave Brim a buff that didn't really change that much, but was just psychological in nature in terms of people feeling good about playing the agent, I think that that would honestly be fine. One change I've always wanted to, see was the stim beacon. It actually emanates off Brim, or giving Brim the second stim beacon. Personally, I don't think would break the agent. I was kind of surprised when they took that away, and so either of those, I wouldn't really mind. Okay, now let's come to Harbor, who probably is a bit more tricky in general in terms of how to buff. There is one thing I have always hated about Harbor's design, and I still can't believe that they haven't changed this, but this is the time, Riot, to change this if you're listening. Please, for the love of God, remove the slow from the allies when they go through a Harbor wall. This annoys me to no end. The reason that this annoys me to no end is because controllers, their main thing, the whole thing about being a controller is that you have smokes, right? You should not be punished, and your team should not be punished for you putting down smokes. This annoys me to no end. I don't understand it. I can understand if a Phoenix wall damages allies as they're going through it, because Phoenix shouldn't really care, what's going on for his allies. It's about him. He's a duelist player, right? That makes sense. But for a controller player, your whole thing is that I'm smoking for the team, right? It's not just for me, it's for the whole team. So why on earth, I understand that, like, okay, yeah, you're going through a big wave, it's cold, it slows you. Okay, cool, get it. But just from a pure gameplay wise, to me it just doesn't make sense with what you're trying to do as a controller to have the walls slow down your allies. That to me just isn't a good idea, and I think if you remove that, that would be really quite good, because then you could set up a lot more kind of, interesting kind of plays as you're, scaling with a cascade, and then as it stops, you're then bursting through it with a flash and whatnot, which is a bit harder to do now because you have to take that slow. But if you didn't have to take that slow, that would be much more possible to do, and it would help Harbor quite a lot. But if you didn't want to do that for whatever reason, or if you wanted to do this as well, I wouldn't mind Harbor's wall potentially being extended as well. The reason that I say this is because there are some interesting walls, and I'm thinking particularly of the loud wall on Pearl, where it goes kind of through all of mid, and you can smoke off all these different angles in mid of Pearl, with the kind of 2-ease Harbor wall. I think if the wall was a bit longer, though, there would be even more of those kind of interesting walls that you could do on a variety of maps, and really kind of, push Harbor in the direction of, if you're creative enough and you, have mastered this agent enough to, solidly get those walls in the right place all the time, that would be a very interesting way of buffing Harbor and allowing you to potentially do some really cool and creative stuff. And then finally we come to Clove, and obviously a lot of you will know I'm not the biggest Clove fan in general, but that's only for the highest levels of the game. I understand that Clove in ranked is a demon, and I think is the highest ranked win rate agent overall as well. And that makes buffing Clove kind of tricky, because obviously you don't just want to give Clove just generic buffs, because then in ranked you just create an absolute demon, and the ranked is broken. So you don't really want to do that. So if Riot just says, hey, Clove, they're a ranked agent, they're not really for pro play, whatever, that's fine if that's what you want to do. If they do want to kind of, meddle with Clove a bit, get what I did there, then what they probably would have to do is probably nerf the pick-me-up at least somewhat, to make Clove a little bit worse in ranked. Again, the healing aspect isn't as big of a deal in high-level pro play, but obviously is a big deal in ranked, so you'd probably have to minimize that a little bit more in ranked in general. And then if you were going to buff anything with Clove, it probably would be the medal, and I think if you wanted to make it, a strong thing for pro play, you would probably look at maybe it reducing the health even more, right? Therefore, it could combo more with things like Raise Nades, or even other abilities, like Snake Bites or Nano Swarms or things like that, right? If the health, really did get down to, like, let's say 20 health, right? Like if your opponent went down all that way, then it really could be used as a really nice combo tool with other abilities in the game, and, would be a pretty strong ability overall. But again, you would probably have to sacrifice something to do with the pick-me-up to make that probably worth it. And so I'm hoping that now that we're in the VCT off season, that Riot is looking at this as their main time to make solid changes to the game. And I think number one focus should be the controller class, because to me it's not that far away from being, a very balanced and healthy class. We just need some small tweaks to, probably Omen at the top and then these guys at the bottom, and we could end up with a really diverse and healthy controller meta, which would be really fun.